Alida, do you think at some point you may be able to get your husband to come on so he can tell us about that Oreo and what possessed him? Because that Oreo cookie changed his life.
I'm sure we can arrange that. I'm sure you would love to hear his side of the story.
We would. That cookie changed his life, so we want, I would love to pick his brain and get him to come on and tell what was going on in his 15-year-old mind to do such a thing. So we'll definitely have to have you guys back on as a couple. And it would be nice to hear his perspective of swirling. I'm someone who appreciates structure. And because we do our best to bring you a podcast that's polished and professional, we're comfortable with having specific topics and doing our best to stay on track during our conversations. Yet, I have to admit, sometimes we get so many gems in those impromptu conversations that take place before and after an official show. Such was the case with Alida Wright Sharp. She's a Black woman who formerly lived in Russia and now lives in Belize. We learned through the course of our conversation how she and her husband Tom met. Listen to this.
I was minding my own business, walking down the hallway one day in school, and he said hi to me, so I answered and I said hi back, and he stuck an Oreo cookie in my mouth.
As lighthearted as that was, as we talked more, the conversation got deeper. We learned about how Alida and Tom were not received as a couple in the early days of their marriage. We also learned that once they got to Russia, their two sons, one blue-eyed and one brown-eyed, encountered very different responses and very different instances of colorism. I think you'll find this conversation both entertaining and funny and enlightening and serious.
Welcome to the Swirl World podcast, brought to you by the swirlworld.com. We're here to help you navigate the exciting world of interracial and intercultural relationships. Whether you've been involved in an interracial relationship for a long time, or you're new to the idea of swirling someone of another race or culture, this is the podcast for you. Here are your hosts, Michelle Matthews Calloway and Adrian London Leach.
They've already turned off the recording.
Oh, I can turn it back on. I'm turning it back on.
We can do part two.
Yeah.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
And your name is Tom or Thomas?
Tom, yes, that's right.
Well, Tom, you care to tell us about that Oreo cookie? What was that?
I have no idea what that was. It was a pure 15-year-old impulse.
It seemed to work.
Yeah. Teenage problem-solving skills, that's all it was.
You know how they talk about little boys, how they pull girls' pigtail or they hit them? It means they like them. So for you to...
Yeah, right.
So were you noticing her or what?
Oh, yes, I definitely had noticed Alida. And I wanted to get her attention. I wanted her to remember me.
I must say that is the most unique way I've ever heard. I like that.
Yeah, like you said, it worked, so...
Right. And, I mean, you took a chance because she could have slugged you or been, like, really mad.
Why do you think I ran? So the next thing in the hallway, Alida was ready with her own Oreo cookies.
Yes.
Ah.
You didn't tell us that, Alida.
Yeah, we had a battle to see who could put the most cookies in the other person's mouth, That's how teenagers meet.
So I knew my objective was completed.
For sure. So tell us about now, you guys were 15 and you got married at 18, right?
Yeah.
So, what was the falling in love? How did, tell us about that.
Well, initially I liked Alida. We were in some classes together, and I really needed her help to do some problem solving. That I had a girlfriend, and I really wanted to break up with this girl, but I didn't know whether I should break up with her before my birthday or after my birthday.
Oh my goodness.
That's always good.
So I need to figure that out.
So like I said, we were friends first. We would get on the phone and talk for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Each day after school, and till one of us had to go to work, or until one of us fell asleep, or something like that. So the friendship happened first, and then we fell in love along the way.
And you said you asked him out first. So what was your first date?
We went to a movie. We went to go see All That Jazz.
Oh, I saw that movie. I've seen that movie. And so, how did you ask him? What did I guess with y'all being friends, it wasn't that difficult, or was it?
No, I just said, "Do you want to go to the movies with me?" And he said, "Sure, let's go." And so we planned it.
And Tom, did you take it from there after the ice was broken, as far as like it being a date and not just friends?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Yeah, he came to pick me up at my house. He was all dressed up nice and, met the parents and all of that. So, yeah, it was definitely a date.
Well, that's something we hadn't talked about. How did you guys' parents respond?
Oh, that's a show.
Yeah, that's a show.
Well, we're definitely going to have y'all come back on and talk about it. I mean, because y'all are swirling pioneers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the loving decision was about, 6 or 7 years before we got married?
Mm-hmm.
So we would be one of those earlier couples.
Yeah, that was directly impact. I mean, all of us have been, but you know what I mean? Like right at the tensions were still very high, because 6 years is not a long time. You think about...
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And even there were people that didn't think it was legal for us to get married.
Well, yeah, I can see that. With that not even being 10 years, there were people that probably still had very strong opinions about it not being...
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had some people in both sides of our family.
Yeah. Yeah, we had family members that did not come to the wedding. We had people that were not supportive of us being together. We had friends taking bets, that it wouldn't last more than 6 months. So we stayed together just to tick everybody off.
Yeah, and I guess even back then in the 80s, I'm sure it was still pretty edgy for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially in the Midwest, I think.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you say that. I heard Alida say that earlier, and people always give the South such a bad rap, which I'm not saying it's undeserved, but people tend to think, the South is so bad, the South, but not just the South.
Not just the South. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why we, once we had our first child, we moved to California, because we wanted to be in an environment where there would be more couples like us around, and there were, in California in those early days. Because we got to California in the late 80s, 88 I think was when we got to California, and it was so much easier there. We were just a normal family in California.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Midwest, we were that interracial couple,
And probably stood out like sore thumbs, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. In Wichita, Kansas, it did.
Oh man, yeah. Because that's part of, if I'm trying to think the U.S. map, the Bible Belt. I know Dallas is said to be like the buckle of the belt, but that's still part of the Bible Belt, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and even in the church, and this is one story that stands out for me. Our very first child was stillborn.
Oh.
And someone went to the pastor of our church and asked if that was God's punishment for us getting married.
Oh wow.
Wow.
I'm speechless. Goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would not be part of a God that I would want to have interest in.
Exactly. Wow. I'm just speechless. My goodness.
Yeah.
And to think that there are people who still use or try to use, they try to use the Bible or quote unquote religious reasons for being anti-interracial dating and marriage. It's incredible.
Right.
Yeah. We had a few pastors that tried to quote scriptures to us, and I grew up in the church, so I could come right back.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't taking him to a foreign god. I wasn't, he wasn't intermarrying with someone that was going to take him away from his relationship with Christ. So we didn't fit those verses they were quoting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was difficult as a teenager trying to explain that theology to a pastor.
Yeah.
Right. You're supposed to be more in a listening and obeying mode versus defending your faith and your understanding of God's word.
Right.
And Mark, didn't you go to Christian camps when you were younger?
When I was really young, and we did have a Bible study group called Campaigner, so I used to go to some of their different summer camps. To one out in it was near the Denver, Colorado area, which was actually where I met my first girlfriend, interracial girlfriend, because I grew up in a very small town where, it was white people, so that was my first experience, and I met her at a Christian camp, and I never had a problem with her, being with her, no one ever looked at it funny. So, I guess I would be blown away if one of the people in charge said something about our relationship together. I'm not even sure I would be able to even quote scripture back. I'd probably be taken aback.
And what about your sons? Have they encountered anything being biracial or mixed race?
Well, our oldest son has very fair skin and blue eyes. My father's eyes are gray, so there's a recessive gene there that allowed that to happen. So we have a blue-eyed son. And when we were in Russia, people did make comments, and they would ask him if he was a mulat, which is, that's the word for mulatto, that's the word for mixed race there in Russia. Mm-hmm. So he did get that question pretty much on a daily basis on public transport, especially. Yeah.
Wow.
So he definitely, he looked different because of the fair skin, the blue eyes, but he has my texture hair, so he did stand out a bit. The younger son, I'd say he looks more black. Mm-hmm. So people always seem to see him as a young black man. And for him, there was some racial tension there in Russia. It was more difficult for him than I think any of the rest of us. Because
he was male and black, or what in particular you think?
Yes.
Well, I think part of the difficulty was how do I say this? It wasn't clear cut what race he was part of because he was mixed. And, Russians see things in very
black and white
terms. And, they spend time observing your face, and, they can tell by the slope of your forehead what part of Europe you're from. And they are very, very curious people, especially with people that they haven't experienced before. So here's this young man who looked mixed. He looked part black and he looked part white, and they couldn't quite figure out what group he belonged to.
How interesting.
And for young college students, like I'm girls from Africa, and they were studying at Kuban State University there because we were in the state we lived in was called Kuban. And they experienced a lot of racial tension, and they told us about a couple of the young male African students that they went to school with. Two of them had committed suicide because the harassment was so bad.